Good evening. Welcome to tonight's meeting of the Committee of Adjustment. This meeting is to consider applications for minor variance and consent held under the authority of the Planning Act of Ontario. Please keep in mind the intent of this process is to review the proposal that is before us, listen to the evidence, and then make a decision. This process is not intended to be used to resolve any concerns or disputes that may exist between the town, individuals, or organizations. If a request for a deferral is made and the committee grants such a request, the committee, after consultation with the Secretary-Treasurer, will set a new hearing date. No further notice will be provided unless there are changes to the application. In order to conduct an effective and efficient hearing, we have adopted the following process. The owner or authorized agent will be given the opportunity, if so desired, to briefly explain to us the basis of the application and answer any questions that may arise out of the hearing. A maximum of 5 minutes will be provided for this presentation. You need to state your full name and address for the record. Any materials submitted to the committee for viewing will remain the property of this committee. Any submissions beyond the 5 minutes will be at the discretion of the committee. All persons attending the hearing who wish to support or oppose the application must also state their full name and address for the record. A maximum of 5 minutes will be provided to make presentation. All remarks and questions are to be directed to the chairperson of the committee. Any submissions beyond the 5 minutes will also be at the discretion of the committee. If there are several speakers sharing the same point of view, we ask that you select a spokesperson to present the group's opinion. We do want to hear the views of everyone in attendance. However, covering the same points will not advance your case. The owner or agent will then be provided with a further 5 minutes to respond to the comments made by any interested parties and answer any questions for the committee members. If the owner or agent has any concerns found in staff reports, particularly with any proposed conditions, this will be the opportunity to advise us. The matter will then be taken into committee for a decision, and this will end all discussion. Once the committee makes an oral decision, any person desiring a copy must file with the Secretary-Treasurer at this meeting a written request for notice of the decision. A green sheet is provided for this purpose at the back of the room. Please note that you must make a written request in order to be included on the list that is used by the local planning appeal tribunal for the giving of any subsequent notice of any appeal. Written notice of the committee's decision will be mailed no later than 10 days for minor variance applications and 15 days for consent applications to the applicant, owner, agent, and any other person who has filled a written request for such a notice. If you do not agree with the committee's decision, you may appeal this to the local planning appeal tribunal. The last date to appeal the decision will be noted on the decision. If no appeal is received within the prescribed time frame, the decision of the committee becomes final and binding, and the Secretary-Treasurer will then notify the applicant through written correspondence. People in attendance attending the committee tonight should be courteous and respectful of the members and the committee, town staff, and other people in attendance tonight. Tonight's meeting will be video recorded and available for future viewing on the town's YouTube channel. We do ask that you maintain your cellular phones on silent or switched off during this meeting, as they do tend to interfere with audio system. Thank you. So we do have one regret this evening, Mr. Mark Charlebois. Are there any declarations of pecuniary interests? I see none. Thank you. I will now take any requests for deferral or withdrawal of applications. I see none. Okay. We do not have any consent applications. We will now start with the first minor variance application on our agenda, which for 2019 CAV 001 at 37 Rancliffe Road. Good evening.
Thank you, Madam Chair. For the record, my name is David Capper with Glenn Schnarr & Associates. Our mailing address is 10 Kingsbridge Garden Circle, Unit 700, Mississauga, Ontario, L5R 3K6. And I'm appearing this evening on behalf of the owner of the property at 37 Rancliffe Road, Ms. Monica Culsey.
Thank you, Mr. Capper. Is there anyone here in attendance for 37 Rancliffe Road? I see none. Go ahead, Mr. Capper. The floor is yours. We have done our site visits, and I'm sure you're familiar with the staff report.
Through you, Madam Chair, yes, I am. The application before you this evening is what is probably best described as a technical variance for an increased dwelling depth. The variance before you seeks an increase from the maximum permitted of 20 meters to the proposed of 21.99 meters. That measurement is actually the measurement from the front of the building at the front porch to the rear of the back slab, if you will, of the basement. So the dwelling depth is being measured at the deepest part of the dwelling, which is actually underground at 21.99 meters. In addition to that, it's also measured to the limits of the rear yard porch, which is a covered porch in the rear yard. The actual dwelling itself is measured at 17.32 meters. So again, it is a technical variance for that reason. And at an appropriate point, I would just like to have a very brief discussion on the recommended condition from the planning staff. I have spoken with my client with respect to the proposed condition. They are amenable to it. However, we would seek some clarification in the wording of the condition just to avoid any ambiguity with respect to what's being requested.
Are there any questions of Mr. Capper at this time? Mr. Chalowski, go ahead.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Mr. Capper, if you're in general supportive of the condition to remove the roof, could you put the drawings up and show us what would be removed? Because it's a little difficult to follow from the elevations.
If you'd forgive me, through you, Madam Chair, to Mr. Chalowski, I am going to have to do this on two drawings. So the elevation that's before you on your screens right now is the rear elevation. The area of concern to planning staff is that area there that I've highlighted very poorly, I will admit, and my apologies about that. That is a second-story covered roof for that portion of the rear amenity space. It is a two-tiered covered porch, whereby the first tier is located here, and then the second tier is located here. And then when you flip to the north and south elevation, you'll observe that this is the two-story component that is causing the concern for staff, and this is the one-story component. And I've discussed that matter with my client, and one of the options that is presented by staff is that that second-story component be lowered so that it's in line with the first story, and my client is amenable to that solution. And then just with respect to the wording of the condition, I'm slightly concerned that it's ambiguous in that it says modified to remove the second-story roof in the rear yard. I think it would be a friendly amendment to add the words second-story roof for the covered porch, to remove any ambiguity with respect to the roof for the dwelling versus the covered porch.
And you've spoken to staff about this amendment?
We have had a discussion about the proposed solution. This is the first opportunity that they've had. I didn't appreciate that the wording was actually in the condition until this evening.
You're okay with that? Okay. Are there any further questions? Yes, he gave us a thumbs up. Any further questions of Mr. Capper? Items of clarification? Yeah, sure.
So, Mr. Capper, the effect of what you're asking is, instead of having a porch off the second story for half of the rear and a roof over the second half of the rear, you're effectively lowering the roof to make it a balcony across the entire rear?
Through you, Mr. Chair, there is no balcony. Sorry, through you, Madam Chair, to Mr. Tulaski. My apologies. There is no second floor balcony at the top side of the covered porch. There is, as you'll note on the elevations, there is a Juliet balcony for one of the double set of doors.
Yeah.
Balconies, as I understand it, are not permitted in this zone, and there's certainly no variance before you this evening. The actual covered portion doesn't actually require a variance. It's something that's been identified by staff so I should say the height of the covered balcony, whether it's 1 story or 2 stories, does not require a variance. It's a concern that's been identified with staff with respect to potential concerns of the effect of that additional height and massing on the adjacent properties.
So I should have said covered porch as opposed to balcony across the entire rear.
Through Madam Chair, if I could ask Mr. Tulaski to repeat that, I didn't hear it.
So there's a reason why council moved out of here. So the effect of what you're asking for is you're going to have a covered porch across the entire rear of the property at the same level, as opposed to part of it being at one level and part of it being at a higher level.
That's what I understand.
Through you, Madam Chair, that's correct. For the portion of the rear yard that is covered, there is an additional area beyond that that's sort of normal rear yard that is uncovered.
If there are no further questions, we can take this matter into committee if Mr. Capper is satisfied.
Yep.
Madam Chair, having conducted my site visit and reviewed the applicant's written submission as well as the town's written staff report, which I noted that was in support of with a condition, and also taking into account the comments presented by the applicant this evening, noting that there were no written nor oral objections or support from the public. I would like to move a motion that the application be approved, and noting the condition, which, if I word it this way, I think the town staff was supportive of, a condition that says that the submitted site plan and elevations dated November 14th, 2018 be modified to remove the second-story roof for the covered porch in the rear yard, or sorry, I'm striking in the rear yard, for the covered porch to the satisfaction of the Director of Planning Services. Okay.
Very well. Thank you, Mr. Flemington. Are there any discussions with respect to this recommendation? I see none. All those in support? Okay, the application has been approved. Thank you, Mr. Capper.
Thank you very much. Have a good night.
Good night. The second item on our agenda tonight, CAV 002 of 2019, is for 516 Morrison Road. Good evening.
Yes, good evening, Madam Chair. For the record, my name is Bill Outred. My business address is 2140 Winston Park Drive, Oakville, Ontario.
Very well, thank you, Mr. Outred. Who is here in attendance for CAV 002 of 2019 at 516 Morrison Road? Is there anyone here in attendance who's interested in this application? I see none. Okay, go ahead, Mr. Outred. The floor is yours.
Okay, thank you. Of course, the overhead is not great here, but Just describe that we're just here for a variance related to an additional coverage for a covered porch that I've indicated in yellow on the site plan. The committee probably recalls that we were here in 2017 for a floor area and a coverage variance. At that time, the rear porch was just a porch at grade, a deck at grade. Since the building permit was issued, the owner has decided to actually build a roof over the porch. And as a result, we are here for the additional coverage. I'm not sure if anything else is needed, but I'd be happy to answer any questions.
Very well, thank you. Are there any questions of Mr. Outridge at this time? Mr. Talowski.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Do you require a revised building permit to do this?
Yes, we do.
Thank you.
Okay, go ahead.
Madam Chair, I'd be happy to move that this application be approved as applied for, finding that it meets the test of the Planning Act and that the porch in question enhances the dwelling. I'd note that there is no opposition to this, and I'd make that approval conditional on development proceeding in general accordance with the drawings provided, and that a revised building permit be issued within 2 years.
Very well, thank you, Mr. Talowski. Is there a discussion on this recommendation? I see none. All those in support? Okay. The application has been approved. Thank you, Mr. Outridge.
Thank you.
The final application on our agenda tonight is CAV 003 of 2019 at 2600 Grand Oak Trail. Good evening.
Good evening, Madam Chair. My name is Christopher Fickert. I'm from IBI Group, 55 St. Clair West in Toronto. I'm here on behalf of the Conseil Secondaire Catholique Monavenir French Catholic School Board.
Good evening, Mr. Fickert. I will just canvass the room. Is there anyone here in attendance for CAV 003 at 2600 Grand Oak Trail? You're here in attendance in support or in opposition or just for information? Is that the case with everybody, or would anyone like to be heard? Well, just raise your hand if you'd like to speak to the committee, and I'll have you come to the podium and address the committee with any questions or concerns. Mr. Fickert, if you can just take us through your application for the benefit of the audience.
Sure.
Thank you.
Thank you, Madam Chair. So we are here this evening to request a variance on the side yard setback. The school was first built in 2013 with a side yard setback of somewhere over 9 meters with a second-story addition in mind. Since that time, an expropriation for a road widening was carried out by the region of Halton, which has moved the property line closer to the building than it previously was. The property line is now 5 meters and 80 millimeters away from the existing building. The required setback is 6 meters in this particular location. So we're requesting consideration that the second-story addition that we're proposing be allowed to be constructed aligned with the existing wall that runs along Dundas Street, which would encroach slightly onto the side yard setback.
Are there any questions of Mr. Fickert at this time? I see none. If you'd like to address the committee or ask questions, please feel free to do so. Mr. Fickert, I'll ask you to sit down and allow the neighbors to ask any questions.
Hello, good evening, everybody.
Your name and address for the record, please.
My name is Gurmeet Singh, and I live at 2567.
Sorry, you're going to have to spell it because the Secretary Treasurer has to put it in record.
Okay. Gurmeet. Last name is Singh.
Singh, okay. And your address?
2567 Grand Oak Trail.
Thank you.
So the question I have is basically, I don't understand the overall plan and the variance being requested, to be honest, actually. But I'm here because when I received the letter, I want to understand the impact. If this is, the intention is to increase the capacity at the school, then this is very close to the traffic signal as well as it's a single lane. So I was just here to understand actually what is being requested and if the impact assessment has been done, and if there are any comments or received from the people who are living around the area. So the way, so whatever has been explained by the gentleman before me is basically, I could understand that it's a variance being requested because of the distance from the Dundas Street side. But with that, in the pictures, if I see, there's a proposed addition actually to the property. So I just wanted to understand actually what is being requested and what would be the impact to the surrounding areas.
Okay. Sorry, I pressed the button. We'll have Mr. Fickard answer all your questions and take you through the drawings. Is there anyone else who'd like to ask a question before he comes back to the podium and answers the questions? Okay, I think they all want to understand the impact in terms, perhaps take us through the elevation in terms of the second floor addition and as well as the addition on the actual property at the floor level.
Of course. Thank you, Madam Chair. So to start with the simpler part, referring to the drawing that's up on the screen, there is a let's see, there's a dashed through Madam Chair. There's a dashed line on the drawing that represents the current property line. Yes, I can. I hope you'll hear. Yes. So, actually, let's go back even one second. Originally, the property line ran back here and around the corner and here. Since that time, because of a road widening, because of the bus stop that is in that location, the region of Halton appropriated the land and shifted the property line to this dashed line. Under the bylaw, we need to maintain 6 meters between the property line and the line of the building. The building is already there as a single-story building. We're proposing to build a second story on top of that. Because of that shift in the property line, that condition is now not satisfying the side yard setback. So that the reason that we're asking for the variance is to allow that addition to happen. I'll demonstrate what it is that we're proposing. Okay, is that better? And if I knew how to lower this, I would. Yes, thank you. It would be great to see the whole elevation.
This is too wide.
Perfect.
You can adjust it as you need it.
Great. Thank you very much. That's fine. I'll wave my hands. So on this drawing, see an area that is in gray that is also crosshatched. That's the existing school as it stands right now. The proposal is to build on top of the existing school with the walls aligning on the first floor and the second floor, a second-story addition that will run all the way along the existing side of the school, and a small two-story addition at the north side of the site. So in reference to your question, sir, about view angles, nothing will change in terms of the junction and the traffic lights because the school is already built. The proposal will be simply vertically above what is already there. Madam Chair, have I addressed the questions, do you believe?
Yes, thank you very much. We appreciate your input. I hope that's addressed your questions. Well, okay. That's why I asked from the beginning. If you had questions, we were supposed to take them in the beginning so that Mr. Ficker can answer them at one point. This is not a back and forth kind of procedure. There's time that's allocated for the applicant to speak, time for whoever has questions or concerns, and then for him to come back and reply. So I will allow it, but this is not in any way a back and forth. So if you've missed your opportunity to ask a question, this will be the time to do so. And I would need you to come to the podium and address the committee because all questions need to go through the committee. Name and address for the record.
It's Zillur Chowdhury, Z-I-L-L-U-R, last name Chowdhury, C-H-O-W-D-H-U-R-Y.
Sorry, C-H-O-W. U-R-Y?
Yes.
U-R-Y.
Sorry.
And your address?
2456 Quetico Crescent.
245?
Quetico Crescent.
I'm sorry, I didn't get.
Q-U-E.
Oh, Q-U-E, Quentico.
T-I-C-O.
Yes, 2456. Okay, go ahead, sir. Thank you.
It's just a simple question. I just wanted to understand if the elevation is from the Dundas side or from the Grand Oak Trail side, this elevation, that's all.
Yeah. The elevation is from the Dundas side, yes. Okay, so that will end all questions. Are there any questions of Mr. Ficker at this time before we take this matter into committee? Okay. We do have a recommended condition. And you're familiar with the condition that's on, that staff has supported.
We are, thank you.
Thank you. If you're ready, we will take the matter into committee. Thank you. Mr. Hardcastle, go ahead.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Having undertaken my site visit, heard the input from the applicant, and having reviewed the staff report, I'm satisfied that the requested variance conforms to the four tests of the Act, and I'll put forward a motion of approval. I would note that there were two members of the public who spoke to the committee, and I'm satisfied that the inquiries and concerns have been addressed through the response by the applicant. So the motion would be subject to two conditions. The first being that the addition be built in general accordance with the submitted site plan and elevations dated December 7th, 2018. The second being that the approval expires within 2 years of the date of the decision if a building permit has not been issued. The standard condition.
Thank you, Mr. Hardcastle. Is there a recommendation on this? Is there a discussion on this recommendation? I see none. All those in support? Okay, the application has been approved. Thank you, sir.
Thank you, Madam.
And I appreciate everyone's input. Okay, so we have minutes from December 18th to confirm. I was not here, so Mr. Hardcastle moves the minutes. Thank you. Motion for adjournment. Mr. Hardcastle, motion to adjourn first meeting of January 2019. Thank you. Meeting has been adjourned.